I deal with chronic pain. I deal with people in corrections. I deal with people with chemical dependency. All the stuff I do is pain. Deal with people's pain. But one of the things that is similar throughout all the individuals I deal with is the early pain in their lives. Trying to cope with that early pain in their lives. Because see, when you have that early pain, people put little voices in your mind and say, you ain't worth this. Or have you feeling like you're not worthy of being loved, or not good enough to be accepted, not good enough to be approved of. You know, because see, my trauma started before I was born. My trauma started before my parents were born. My trauma started before my grandparents were born. But let's start with my grandparents. My father's father, bootlegger, Charleston, South Carolina, in the woods. Hard man, hard on his children, doing the best he could. Had to raise himself, so he had to figure out how to be a man. And unfortunately, when people raise themselves, they go to the furthest extreme to be that man, to show that manhood. Hard on my father. Okay. Now my grandmother, a very holy woman. Now I might step on a few toes here, but she's a little too holy. Too judgmental. Gave a lot of guilt. Found many ways to make you feel bad, because in some way that was the way she dealt with her trauma. And dealing with my grandfather, who, that if he didn't hear things the way he wanted to hear, go upside your head. Now that's one of my mother's side of the family. Okay? My grandmother was the evilest person I ever known. Beautiful brown-skinned woman. Lost her arm. And she lost her arm fussing with my pretty grandfather. I had a grandfather who was extremely handsome. I got a little of that. And the problem here is my grandfather had his own trauma, because my grandfather was mulatto. Okay? But he wasn't raised by his mama. He was raised by his mama's sister, who had purple black children. My grandfather was so like he was close to white, as they put it. So he had the trauma of not actually being given away, so his mother could continue to live. So he could continue to live. And nobody told him, even though he looked different, you know, because the question was, why do I look different than the other 10? And why did they call me white? So we're talking about trauma within trauma. You notice I'm not even talking about the trauma that we often talk about, like slavery and, you know, racism, because we know about that. I'm talking about the trauma that we do to ourselves. Right. Yeah. Okay? And so, those are my grandparents. As I said, my grandmother was an honoring, evil woman. And it wasn't that she wasn't a good person, it's that she caught hell from so many folks. She caught hell from my grandfather. She caught hell from her father. See, I don't know enough about that. But she gave my mother hell as well. Because my grandmother held grudges. So, anger, My grandmother was physically abusive to my mother because she looked like my grandfather. Okay? My mother had to go live in the city of Charleston to get away from my grandmother. So my mother grew up a bougie, upperly snooty black woman. That's my mama. God bless my mama. But she was. She thought she was better than other black folks. See, I'm telling some secrets that that we know within the community. We don't talk enough about. Right. And don't look at how that trauma actually contributes to the trauma that we continue to share with each other. My parents. So my mother grew up depressed. My father grew up depressed, trying to get that old man to say he loved him. My aunt finished raising my daddy. That was her baby brother. My aunt had to deal with my grandmother, the one that was holy, who took away her child because she thought she was too young to have it, and raised it as her. And I didn't know that was not my uncle. That wasn't my uncle. That was my cousin. I didn't learn that till I was 21. Oh, the secrets. When I found out certain of my real drama, I remember when I found out that I was at the wedding. But I remember the day. I went in the can, I started digging through stuff, and I found their marriage license. Okay? I was born in September. My parents were born in April. By then I had sex education class. And I could count. April, May, June, July, August, September. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, Mom, was I premature? I'm still seeing stars. Okay. My father, who was the sharecropper's son, he didn't want much. We lived in the projects and didn't have to. My mother wanted much more than that. My mother had to drop out of school to have me and punish that man for the rest of his life for that. My mama had a toy poodle. White toy poodle in the project. More trauma. And the poodle's name was Gidget. Again, we lived in the project because my father just wanted to have a roof over his head, and it was cheap. We had cookies. The other kids was eating grease sandwiches. And we weren't kidding nobody, so we was getting beat up, traumatized outside the house. And when you got more stuff than other people, it hurts them. And so we got beat up often because, in the projects we lived in, everybody was another cousin from Mississippi and Tennessee, and we wasn't no cousin to nobody, so if you got into a fight, I learned when you get in a fight, you beat that boy down so bad that his cousin would think twice about coming and get you. Then we go to a primarily white church and get traumatized there too. So the thing is, so now we got a father who basically want to go to work, have a little drink on, and you got this mother who is not happy, and then when he would come home and watch TV with us, would come in the room and say, Samuel, know what your children did today? We were only my father's children when we did something wrong. And my father's face would go into the plate because he don't want to hear it. I just went to work all day. Why can't you deal with this stuff? They're boys. And she'd tell him, and then he would say, they're boys. Boys do that stuff. She said, but they ain't had a whooping in a while. Okay? And my father whooped us. And I remember one day when we was all getting drunk, because, once we got older, we learned how to drink together. All 5 of us. and when people get drunk, they start feeling the trauma. And I was sitting there drinking and watching my father getting angry. And my question to him was, Daddy, why did you beat us when she said so? And I'll never forget this, because this was the most honest thing my daddy ever said to me in life. He said, I had to live there too. Ooh. Ouch. Ouch. So now, that's just part of my trauma. We ain't even talking about my brothers, you know. But my brothers, the one next to me, is interesting. My brother next to me got in all kind of trouble. And again, during one of them drinking sessions. It was interesting what kind of stuff came out in one of them drinking sessions. We had one of them drinking sessions. My brother next to me, he says, you know, the reason I would do all these things wrong, that was against the rules, is he said, you did everything right. And they still beat the crap out of you. Oh. Yeah, I was traumatized. I have a long history of traumatism. Okay? But I realized that if I was going to stop the trauma, I had to stop it with me. Otherwise, the children that I had with that first wife of mine, who I actually didn't treat well, who I had to apologize to, was going to have to be suffered from my trauma. And they did to a certain degree. So I had to take responsibility for me. I had to deal with my chemical use. I had to deal with my anger. And understand that I was angry at everybody. I was angry at myself for not having more, doing more of my life. And then what I realized is I need to spend less time blaming my parents.
All right.
Because see, you look at my website, and my website it says, we only do what we're taught. But it's up to you to do it differently. Not by yourself. It doesn't mean you don't need help. But the first thing you have to do is take that responsibility. Yes, I'm in pain. I'm in pain. And I don't always know why, but I need to do that. So we got to deal with the pain. Our part. But I want to thank you, and I hope this has been beneficial.